This conference will now be recorded.
Okay. Hi, and I hope everyone's well at the moment. Certainly feels like things are starting to lighten up, and we can see the end of the lockdown, which is fantastic. And I've just heard that it looks like some of the airlines might be looking to open up. I think Qantas is talking more mid-June now rather than late June. So that will actually be good timing for some of what I'm going to talk about today up in the Northern Territory, because I personally think it, might be an option for people wanting that really steamy holiday instead of going all the way to Bali, for example. So I'm going to skip through about myself and alchemy because you've heard all about us, and skip straight through to what I'm going to talk about today, which is a brief introduction to the top end. I will try and cover as much as I can about why to go, a little bit about Darwin because it's more interesting than you probably think it might be, Kakadu, Catherine Gorge, some of the luxury accommodation, and then I'm just going to touch on Arnhem Land as well. It's not, it's not typically a massive seller for us, but I think certainly there's some huge opportunities coming up with Arnhem Land. So just, obviously, where is it? The top end. So we're talking about this top half of the Northern Territory here. And so in terms of flying there from Sydney, it's about 4.5 hours. Similar for Melbourne, Perth 3.5 hours, and Broome, if you're flying over and you're sort of doing that Kimberley region, it's about a 2.5 hour journey, usually with a stop probably in Kununurra. And even Cairns isn't that far away. So we can also organise private air charter if your clients have the budget. I've touched on this in the past. So basically, why go? And it's really those vast landscapes with very few people. The top end has less than 1% of the population of Australia up there, and a very strong Indigenous culture. And what's so beautiful about it is there's such a variety up there. It's got these huge wetlands regions. When you fly above, you see these big river systems that are just winding away. You've got these gorgeous gorges and escarpment area and incredible waterfalls. So it really is just that beautiful, vast countryside that's very compelling to go and look around and visit. Best time of year, same as with the Kimberley. So very much dry season between April and October. And again, a lot of it becomes impassable during the wet season, and it gets very, very hot. Places shut down, and it's just not as you're probably just not going to get as much out of your trip if you're going in the wet season. That said, we went in November the last time I was there, and it was starting to get really hot, but I actually enjoyed it because there just weren't as many tourists. It's a bit like going to the Kimberley in April, still very hot, but not as many tourists, so you kind of can have some of those places to yourself. In terms of getting around and how long to spend there, look, I say 6 to 14 days, a bit like the Kimberley, because there is so much to do and see, and there are all those vast distances. Really getting around the top end, typically it will be sort of your four-wheel drives. We recommend a private safari because that means that you can get taken to places that people don't know. There's not as much cruising around the top end as there is with the Kimberley. I don't know why that is, but you don't really find those. You don't find a top end luxury cruise the way you find the sort of the true north in the Kimberley. You can self-drive, and I've certainly self-driven a little bit around, but really when you're wanting to get off the beaten track, that's when you need the guide. There's also those group camping trips as well, but again, your clients will be having to get up early with a whole bunch of people and long drives. It's not really my style. So why come? You've got these birds. That whole top end is just this haven for bird life. So I flick back to this slide. So these are what are called magpie geese, And every year you get something like 100,000 of these magpie geese that descend upon sort of Darwin and that top end region, and they really are spectacular. You'll just be pottering around Darwin and you'll see them all plonked around feeding. But when you go out onto those floodplains and you see them taking off en masse with millions of other birds, it just looks spectacular. And you've also got these other fabulous birds. I mean, the jabiru and the brolga, and this is a bustard. They're really quite big birds. Sort of, they'd come up, past your knee. And to see them in flight, flocks of them, really incredible. You get these the cockatoos and the corellas. This little thing here, I think it's called a Jesus bird because he kind of walks on water. So there's all this really interesting bird life there. And then you also get similar wildlife to in the Kimberley region. You've got the crocodiles. You've got lots of these Asian water buffalo that I think they were from farming days about 100 years ago, and then they've just sort of been released and bred. Obviously, lots and lots of fishing, and you've got the reptiles. This is a little wallaby called an agile wallaby. They're really cute little things. They only sort of come up knee height rather than being the bigger kangaroos. And then you've got obviously all the Aboriginal culture in this region as well. So and I'll touch on that in a minute. So really this is the top end here. Most of what I'm going to be talking about today is sort of where all these highlights are. And then you've got Arnhem Land, and I'll touch on that in a little bit. And so smack bang in the middle, you've got Kakadu National Park, which is about 20,000 square kilometres big. It really takes up a fair amount of the top end. And then you've got these islands up here called the Tiwi Islands. And this up here is called the Coburg Peninsula, which I'll touch on when I talk about Arnhem Land. So you can see there's, the red dots are the accommodation. There's not, a huge amount, but you've got quite a number of sort of sites to go and see. So Darwin itself, when I first visited there, probably about 5 years ago, I don't think I'd been for 20 years before that, I was really, really pleasantly impressed that it was quite a progressive town, and it had come a long way. It's out on this peninsula if you haven't been there. So basically the airport's somewhere down here, and then you've got the main city part, and you've got an area here that is called the waterfront, and then you've kind of got this beach area here, which is perfect for looking at the sunsets over the ocean, and where they have some good markets, which I'll talk about in just a second. So in terms of just the history of Darwin, certainly if you've got clients that are interested in war history, it is an interesting destination. So it was bombed by Japan in 1942. There were loss of lives there. So you can go and learn about the war history of Darwin. There are specific tours around that. And then also, if you remember back in, I think it was December of 1974, you had Cyclone Tracy that came along and literally just tore the place apart. So when you visit Darwin, most of what you'll see in terms of housing and accommodation and any of the buildings are pretty much post-Cyclone Tracy, because the city needed to get rebuilt. There are a couple of kind of old colonial style buildings there, but really most of it is all from 1975 and after. In terms of day tours, we always used to sort of, especially because we mainly deal with international tourists, we'd sort of just get them into Darwin and get them out straight away. But actually you could spend a couple of days in Darwin itself. There's lots of sort of, interesting Indigenous day tours that they can do. There's the art museum there, the gallery, which is really, really interesting, and I would highly recommend doing a stopover there. And then also you've got activities like this is called Crocodylus Cove, where you can actually go into this perspex container in with a crocodile. It's totally not my style at all, but something fun for the kids. You have these wonderful sunsets pretty much yeah, every time I've been there, I've just seen these incredible sunsets. You know, during the dry season, they absolutely rival any sunset in Bali. They've got this beautiful big long beach there, so you can just go and sit on the beach and watch the sun as it goes down. Usually I think it's a Thursday and a Sunday during the dry season, they have the Mindel Beach markets, which are, you know, a great place to go to have some dinner. It's really vibrant. They usually have some music playing. And then they also have these an outdoor theatre there to go and watch a movie. So you do have like quite a vibrant life there, and you can also take a sunset sailing trip. One thing to point out is you can't really swim at the beach. Well, you're not advised to, because up again in this region you've got crocodiles there. So they do come and check the beaches, and if crocodiles do appear, they do relocate them. But obviously swimming in the beaches at your own risk, I probably wouldn't do it. Darwin surprised me with its dining. So you've actually got some, this is Pee-wee's, you've got some nice kind of beachside restaurants there, and then you've got some funky little cool ones in town. Or we could organise some kind of pop-up dining experience with an Indigenous chef on the beach. But the food in Darwin's absolutely amazing, mainly because the town itself is so multicultural. It's got a lot of Asian influence. So you've got great street food there as well. I mentioned the Mindel markets, but there's some other markets as well where they're famous for serving curry laksa for breakfast at the Parat markets. So the food, you can eat actually really well in Darwin, much better than you probably assumed you could. And then in terms of accommodation, it's very comfortable, but it's probably not what we would call super luxury. So you've sort of got like the Vibe and the Adina, which are sort of around this waterfront area, where you've got sort of an artificial swimming beach, so it's blocked off from any crocodiles, so people can sort of go down there and swim. And then you've got actual beachside accommodation. This used to be called the Star City Casino. It's now called the Mindel Beach Resort and Casino. So this overlooks the ocean. It is part of a casino complex. So for some people, you know, that they don't want to sort of be associated with a casino, but they do have this new accommodation area here that they've opened up a few years ago with a beautiful pool, and you've got options there where you can just walk out your room and go for a swim. And they're probably your most luxurious accommodation in Darwin. But you can also stay in this building here, these buildings here. This one's got a really nice sort of infinity pool overlooking the beach, and sort of, you know, it's kind of really feels like you're in Bali when you're swimming at that pool. So in terms of day trips from Darwin, I'll just cover a couple of them. I mentioned a few weeks ago about this day trip where you can take a seaplane, land on a lagoon, go for an airboat trip, and do a helicopter trip. So this is the pontoon where you pull up to and you have some breakfast. It really is a fantastic day trip from Darwin. It's incredible how you just feel like you are really in the middle of nowhere. There's also a sort of an overnight day trip that has a similar kind of experience. So this is called the Top End Safari Camp, run by Matt Wright, and you sleep in these sort of Lotus Bell tents here. They've got showers. I'm not 100% if they've actually got toilets or whether that's separate. This is sort of I wouldn't say it's backpacker, but it's more sort of it's not really your upscale market. And then you've got trips out to the Tiwi Islands, so you can either do a day trip, so you know whether it's a seaplane or a helicopter out there, or you can actually get a ferry, and you can go and look at the different art and collect some art. There is accommodation there as well on the Tiwi Islands. This is a bit of a picture of it down here. So if you did want to stay, if your clients did want to stay overnight, they certainly can do that as well. Heli fishing and pub crawls, I've touched on this in the past. So these are possible out from Darwin for a day trip. And then you've got the Adelaide River and the Jumping Crocs experience. So this is probably about an hour or so out of Darwin. I'm not necessarily a fan of seeing wildlife in a bit of an artificial. It's in the wild, but it's they're basically baiting the crocodiles to come and jump out of the water. I'm not really a massive fan of that style of tourism, but actually when you see the crocodiles do their thing, it just is really impressive. Yeah, so as much as I don't really like it, I absolutely love it at the same time, and recommend it. And then you've got Litchfield National Park, which is the closest national park to Darwin, and possible in a day trip. So you can go and have these kind of swim hole experiences and waterfalls. It's quite a long day trip to get there and back in the one day, but it is possible. Otherwise, it's sort of a good option to stop there on the way to or from Katherine when you're going to Katherine Gorge. The one thing to note about Litchfield National Park is if you're just doing a self-drive there, it can get fairly busy in these waterholes, mainly because everyone else who's in the sort of a two-wheel drive vehicle will all go to the same kind of places. So this is when, for example, a private guide is really important because they can take you down a four-wheel drive track to waterfalls and swim holes that are really off the beaten track. And now to Kakadu, which obviously you've all heard of. So it was made a national park. I don't know when it was, but it hasn't always been a national park. It used to be a sort of a cattle station, and we have a guide who actually grew up there, who I'll touch on in just a minute. But really, Kakadu was made famous probably around the world in Crocodile Dundee, with some of the beautiful scenery there. So if you ever want to sort of think about Kakadu, just think of Crocodile Dundee. So you've got these beautiful terrain, escarpment territory. You've got waterfalls. This waterfall down the bottom was one of the ones in Crocodile Dundee. So you can swim down the bottom, and you can also swim up the top of the waterfalls. You've got this yellow water billabong where they do sunset cruises. Absolutely stunning and serene, and you'll see all sorts of birds and wildlife. And then you can go and do your four-wheel driving and see some termite mounds and all sorts of other interesting bits and pieces with a good guide. So really, Kakadu is just a beautiful opportunity to spend a few days literally just going around, spending an afternoon having a picnic and swimming in some water holes. There's also a huge amount of rock art there at the Ubia sites, the Ubia rock art galleries, which would be a typical stop off on any Kakadu trip. In terms of accommodation in Kakadu, so really there's not a lot. So you've got the Mercure, so the main town in Kakadu is called Jabiru. So you've got a few options there. You've got the Mercure crocodile-shaped hotel here, but that's, once you're inside, you really just feel like you're in any hotel anywhere in the world. So it's not particularly, doesn't really feel like you're on much of a holiday there, I suppose. Also in Jabiru, there's Anbink. So they've got little sort of mini self-contained cabins here. They've got gorgeous outdoor showers. This is part of a bigger complex that sort of also caters for campers and kind of more backpacker style. So again, it's not really high end, but I guess at least you sort of got the outdoor showers, and that's a little bit, feels sort of a bit holiday-ish. And then you've also got Coinder Lodge, which again is also part of a bigger complex. This is not in Jabiru, it's a bit further away. Again, so you're sort of amongst campers and backpackers, and they've got sort of set up tents and whatnot for people there. But so really there's no pure luxury at all in Kakadu itself. But really it's all about the experiences rather than the accommodation. So it's just up to you to really set the expectations for your clients. So one of the key guides we use, guiding companies we use for Kakadu trips is Lord Safaris. And this is Sab Lord here, and this is his other offhand guy called Dean. So Sab grew up in Kakadu National Park before it became a national park. His dad owned a cattle station there, and he grew up with all the Aboriginals, running around barefoot before he was shipped off to a private school in Sydney at the age of 13 or something along those lines. So he's got all the contacts, you know, and knows all the secret places to go. And so that's where that sort of private guiding experience comes in, when you've got someone who's got that deep knowledge of a destination. So he's got his own sort of private camp in the middle of Kakadu. So you can sort of see this picture here. They are little twin share tents. None of them have en suites, so you actually need to walk about 50 metres, and then there's a public toilet block. So again, there's no luxury. It's all about setting those expectations. But the accommodation there, so you stay there, and they'll cook up some food around the campfire, and you'll have a drink watching the guides cook. And so that's all part of the kind of experience. All of our clients absolutely love experiences with Lord Safari, so we've been using them for absolutely years. And then further afield, you've got Catherine Gorge, now called Nitmiluk. And so Nitmiluk's about 3.5 4 hour drive from Darwin, depending whether you stop off and see things or not. It's you can easily do it as a self-drive, and there are lots of sites to see on the way to and from Catherine Gorge. But when you get there, you've just got, it is absolutely stunning, and I would really recommend it as one of the highlights in the top end. It's actually a series of 13 gorges, not just one gorge, and they get progressively smaller as they go upstream. And so there's all sorts of activities you can do there, whether it's walking around the rim of the gorge. There's boat cruises, there's sunset dinner cruises. You can go kayaking. For your sort of luxury clients, we would definitely recommend a helicopter trip to go and land at the top of a waterfall and have a little picnic or a drink. Yeah, absolutely stunning. I was there. This is a picture of me in there when it was raining one morning, but it was still just absolutely spectacular, and definitely one to put on an itinerary. And then accommodation there is at Secada Lodge. So this is actually a pretty nice hotel, really. They've got a little swimming pool there. The rooms are really large, very, very comfortable, and they overlook sort of a gorge, I guess, itself. The food was really good there, and the service was really good, considering that you're sort of really in the middle of nowhere near, you know, near Catherine. Yeah, really surprising, and a really nice option. On the way driving there, we popped into this sort of Indigenous experience, and we got taught how to paint. That's my painting there of a fruit bat. You learn to use a spear, and you learn some Indigenous stories and some culture. So it's just a really nice option. They also have some orphan kangaroos hopping around, so a really nice experience. And then they're just some of the pictures of the quirky locals that are decorating some of the termite mounds around the area. So as I said, the drive to Catherine, it's on a sealed road, so very easy to do as a self-drive. So we could put together a bit of a self-drive itinerary in sort of just Darwin, Litchfield, and Catherine Gorge. Going into Kakadu, you probably want a 4-wheel drive just to be able to go and see some of the more special places there. And then in terms of luxury accommodation, so I talked about Bullo River Station last time, which is in the East Kimberley, but technically it's sort of also in the top end. So I won't go any further into that today. There is also Wildman's Wilderness Lodge, which is on the way to Kakadu. So it is a good option for people looking for something fairly near Kakadu that's much more on the luxury side. You've got 2 types of accommodation there. You've got these cabins, which are air conditioned, really, really nice, and they've got a really cool shower, so you can have a shower and just look out into the middle of nowhere. And then you've also got these luxury tents as well. So they've got, I don't know, it's probably about 14 of the luxury tents there, but you can see they are in 2 rows. So you'd want to make sure you booked a sort of a front row tent, as they look out over, they actually look out over an airstrip. But yeah, so Wildman's offer, that's much sort of more done on a normal hotel basis. So you just book the room, and then you have to pay extra at their restaurant for your any dining, and then you also pay extra for any touring. So they do offer, you know, sunset cruises and you know, bird watching and safari style tours, day tours to Litchfield and whatever, but it all gets paid extra, so it's not all inclusive. And then really the premium accommodation in the area, and one that I personally think should be in any itinerary, any luxury itinerary up in the top end, is Bamaroo Plains. It's a luxury lodge of Australia. It is by far one of my favourite properties in Australia, and this is kind of a shot of it. It's on a buffalo pastoral station that's 100 square kilometres, and it's on a floodplain. So every wet season, you know, I spoke about the rains coming, and then as they recede and dry off, you get this kind of scenery. It's very similar to the Okavango Delta, and they have these airboats, so you can go out and do airboat safaris. You've got a main lodge here, and then you've got 5 safari bungalows on either side of it, and you really feel like you are sleeping in the middle of the wilderness. The tents are mesh on 3 sides. I should call them safari bungalows, not tents. Mesh on 3 sides, so you just feel like the animals are there, right next to you. You can see, looking back at them, they at night time they're a little bit see-through. At daytime, absolutely not. But they are very private, and you can sort of see that there's trees between them. Generally, people aren't walking in front of them, and at the back you've got the ensuite. So they are very, very private. You don't really notice any of your neighbours at all. You can't hear them. And you know, waking up in one of these tents is just one of the most beautiful experiences you'll ever have. The beds are super comfortable. They've got fans in 7 of the rooms, and then 3 have air conditioning. So if your clients are a bit nervous about, you know, being in the hot, they can choose that option. Personally, I wouldn't choose the air conditioning option. I feel like because you've got to be more closed off for the air conditioning, you're really missing that immersion in the wilderness, and it really isn't that hot at night. So you can sleep very comfortably with the fan, or even turning the fan off. In the dry season, it's absolutely not too bad. Gorgeous, gorgeous, gorgeous. Absolutely put it on your to-do list. And these are some of the experiences. So going out on an airboat safari, you can just see, you know, this in the background here, you can probably see all these birds flying up. So this is those thousands of magpie geese and other birds that I was talking about. It really is just a stunning way to see the top end. And then they have sort of safari drives as well. So you can explore the rest of the property on a sort of an outdoor Jeep kind of style. They've got beautiful paperback forests. The guides here are some of the best you'll find in Australia. So their knowledge and their way of interpreting the land for your clients is like what you'll find in Africa. And then at the main lodge, so this is kind of your main base during the heat of the day. You'd go and spend some time at the infinity pool there, and it's typically communal dining, which I find really nice, because you get to know the other guests, who are usually like-minded people. So you've got a nice long dining table. The food's really, really good. It's all inclusive. You've got a sort of a help yourself bar over in the corner here, so you can go and help yourself to a drink any time of the day. There's soft drinks and all sorts of beer and wine and spirits. There's a nice lounge to relax. So really, the opportunity at Bamaroo Plains is you You can select different packages. Some are including the activities, and some are more just for people who don't want to do any activities and they just want to relax. I would always recommend advising your clients to pick the ones with the activities, because what typically happens is that people will get there and then realize that they want to do activities, and it just makes it a lot easier to, and you can probably get commission on selling it up front. Bamaru also offers day trips to Arnhem Land and Kakadu. So typically with Bamaru, I'd say stay there at least 3 nights, and then if you wanted to go to Arnhem Land or Kakadu, then stay an extra night. That way you get to do 2 full days of the Bamaru activities. So you get a couple of airboat safaris, you probably get a walking safari and a jeep safari, or maybe a boat cruise. And then you could spend the last day doing a trip to Arnhem Land and Kakadu. The setup that they've got is that you will fly from the Bamaru property in a small plane into Jabiru in the middle of Kakadu, and your guide will meet you there, take you out touring for the day, and then you'll drive all the way back to Bamaru. It is a fairly big drive back to Bamaru, which is why you probably don't want to do it both ways, but really worthwhile. It's a nice way. It's a nice way of staying in luxury and getting a taste of what's in Arnhem Land and Kakadu. And I should also just point out for any of your clients that are into fishing, and maybe sometimes they go to New Zealand or America for fishing, Bamaru actually turns into a fishing lodge during what we call the runoff season. So after the sort of monsoon rains have stopped and before the dry season. And literally you can go out on the airboats, or they've got other boats, you can go out on the rivers. And from what I've heard, you could literally catch about 300 barramundi in one day. You're just putting your rod in and pulling it out again straight away, because there's that many fish. So during the fishing lodge season, it's not operating all the other activities, and it's not running it as such a high-end luxury lodge either. It really is all about the fishing, and you just go fishing for 8 hours a day. So not my kind of thing, but I'm sure plenty of people absolutely love it. And then just to finish off, I'm going to quickly talk about, I should just quickly say, to get to Bamaru, you can self-drive there. It's about a 3.5 hour drive, and they'll meet you at the gates, and then they'll pop you into a 4-wheel drive Jeep, and they'll take you through the property to the lodge. The other way to get there, and probably I think the nicest way, is it's a 30-minute scenic flight from Darwin, landing on their own airstrip there, and then again you get greeted in a jeep and taken on a bit of a safari back to the lodge. And seeing that region by air, a bit like the Kimberley, really fascinating just to look down, see the way the rivers curve around, and just the landscape. So that's probably the top way to get to Bamaru. So now Arnhem Land, so it's really this big area here. Technically, I believe Kakadu actually counts as Arnhem Land, but I guess it's a little bit different since it's a national park. So it's almost 100,000 square kilometres, and it's only got about 16,000 people in it, with about 12,000 Indigenous. So a really high percentage of Indigenous population. Very remote. You can see from this map there's a few towns around the border, but really not a lot. Just as all of that top area, lots of beautiful art and beautiful scenery. Arnhem Land is an Aboriginal reserve, I guess is probably the best word for it. So you do actually need a permit to go into Arnhem Land, and really I would advise any trip to Arnhem Land, you should go with a guide who knows people and can get you an in to the culture, because that's really why you are going to Arnhem Land. As a little bit of a history lesson, so Arnhem Land, the people there, well, there's proof now that there was occupied people there from sort of 43 to 48,000 years ago. They found this, like the oldest stone axe, or parts of the stone axe. I think they just found a tiny bit of the rock. So it's really sort of showing just how long people have been living in that area in settlements. And then you had the Dutch who touched by this area on their way up to Indonesia in about 1623, and that's actually where the name Arnhem Land came from, because the Dutch ship was called the Arnhem, and they came up on the beach. And then you've also got this really interesting trading with the Macassans, which were the Indonesians who actually were trading with China, and so they were trading the sea cucumber, the sea slug, which the Aboriginals weren't interested in whatsoever. It's actually poisonous unless you do all sorts of treatment to it. So the Indonesians would collect them, they'd boil them for a day, and then they'd dry them, and then they'd boil them again, and they'd dry them. And this took about 5 days worth of boiling and drying, and then they'd slice them up and take them back to China. And the Chinese loved it. They thought they were aphrodisiacs. I think, you know, something to do with the shape of the cucumber, and they sea cucumber, and they squirt things out. But the Aboriginals were trading with these people from, you know, close to 400 years ago. And so they were sort of getting tools off the Indonesians and using them as well. So there's that sort of that side of things. They also learnt the Indonesian language, and you know, had quite a good trading relationship with them way before white people came along. In terms of art, and just ducking into Arnhem Land, so you can sort of do Arnhem Land in a couple of ways. You can just pop in from Kakadu, so you can just pop in sort of for a morning or an afternoon, just into this area kind of right here. Or you could do, you know, multi-day tours either up to this area here called the Coburg Peninsula, or you could fly in even further and go over to East Arnhem Land and explore this area and stay here. So me personally, I've only been into this little bit here to explore this Aboriginal rock art site called Angelic Hill, and you know, it is just one of the most spectacular art scenes I've ever seen. You've got probably about 17 of these kind of overhang galleries, just with art layered on top of art, layered on top of art. Beautiful, beautiful scenery. You can do this sort of climb. It's probably about 200 meters high to have a beautiful look out. And then you can go and meet all the local artists who've got their own little art community there. Watch them paint, get to know them, see how they do things, and they've also got a shop there. So that's quite a nice kind of, you know, day trip in from Kakadu or from Bamaroo. That's what you would do. But really, you can go deeper than that, and we can organise other kind of art expeditions if your clients, you know, have a real passion for Indigenous art. What's interesting about some of the art up here is you've got, I think it's about 4 different sort of eras of the Aboriginal art, and one of the eras is what they call contact art, where they've done paintings of ships, white settler ships that they see, and explorer ships coming around. So we can organise to, you know, go to some, you know, places that are not usually accessible to the public, and meet some other artists there who are doing some work, get some art commissioned, so we can, you know, organise quite an in-depth Indigenous experience as well. I touched on the Coburg Peninsula, which is this little spot up here. So this could be part of, you know, a combined Kakadu Arnhem Land experience. You've got the Coburg Coastal Camp up right in the top corner there. It's overlooking the ocean. It's up quite high, so you're okay away from the crocodiles, and very much, you know, going and learning about the Indigenous culture. They're big on fishing, so you can go out fishing, seeing all the wildlife, and just having, you know, quite an authentic immersion up in the Arnhem Land up the top there. You also have another area, Davidson's Arnhem Land Safaris. It's got a camp on a 700 square kilometre sort of Aboriginal sacred site. So very comfortable here. You know, very beautiful. Again, lots of billabongs, paperbark swamps, the monsoonal rainforest, so when the rains come in, and lots of interesting Aboriginal artwork as well, whether that be an occupation site where they've been living, or burial sites. They've got catacombs there. So again, part of that real immersion into the Indigenous culture. And then for people who really want to get immersed in it, there's experiences like these, the Lirawi tours. So you actually go and spend time with a community. It depends on the time of year and what's been going on with their communities, where you would go and with what community you would actually stay with. And yeah, you won't know until sort of closer to the time that you're going where you'll actually go, but you'll learn things like weaving and spear throwing, mud crabbing, bush foods, all sorts of very strong cultural activities there. I personally am really excited to go and do this as soon as COVID lifts and that we can go there. And then you've also got sort of island retreats. This is Bremer Island, a place called Banu Banu. So again, this is sort of an opportunity to immerse yourself in the Aboriginal culture, or you could just have a relaxing stay as well, or a bit of a combination of both. Again, great for fishing as well. All of that whole top end and Arnhem Land is amazing for fishing. So that's sort of a big theme that runs through. And then really that's kind of it for the top end kind of intro. I just thought I'd leave you with a movie that's coming out soon. And I don't know if you're as interested as I am in the whole Indigenous culture, but this movie with Simon Baker and Jack Thompson is coming out soon, called High Ground, and it's about the frontier wars that were in that area just after World War I. So just keep an eye out for that movie. It might inspire you with some of the beautiful scenery, as well as give you a history lesson of what actually went on in the region. So that's it for this time. Does anyone have any questions? Please unmute.
No, but thank you. That was great.
Oh, you're welcome. Yeah, if you need any more information, just let us know. And if you'd like sort of an itinerary suggestion, we're happy to sort of put that together for you as well. Thank you.
Great, thanks.
Thank you.
Thank you.
Thanks, I thought it was really good. Thanks so much.
Thank you. That was really interesting.
Thank you. Great.
Thank you, Nicola. Excellent presentation.
You're welcome. Thank you.